In the early 1940s, as the world was plunging into the chaos of global conflict, a wave of excitement swept across military aviation circles. A group of engineers and military planners in the United States and abroad were racing to produce fighter aircraft that could dominate the skies. Among these emerging designs was the Brewster Buffalo, an aircraft that promised innovation, speed, and technological superiority. It was a single-engine, all-metal monoplane, boasting an enclosed cockpit, retractable landing gear, and advanced features that were rare in fighters of the time. The American forces, impressed by its sleek lines and modern construction, heralded it as a game-changer, a symbol of the future of aerial combat. Before its deployment in combat, the Brewster Buffalo underwent rigorous test flights that appeared to confirm its potential. Pilots praised its stability, ease of control, and the reliability of its radial engine, which seemed to offer both power and endurance. The aircraft's designers had equipped it with a pair of .50 caliber Browning machine guns, enough to give it a perceived edge over contemporary threats. The England Prime Minister and allied military advisors took notice, considering its acquisition to bolster their own air forces. In addition, several nations, including Finland, the Netherlands, and the British Royal Air Force, expressed keen interest in the plane. Early reports emphasized its maneuverability, speed, and structural integrity, leading many to believe that the Brewster Buffalo would set a new standard in fighter aircraft design. Air warfare was evolving rapidly. The lessons from the Spanish Civil War and early conflicts in Europe suggested that agility, speed, and firepower were essential for success. The Buffalo seemed to meet these criteria on paper. Military publications highlighted its potential, describing it as lightweight yet resilient, fast yet controllable, and capable of performing in multiple combat scenarios. Its introduction created high expectations among pilots and strategists alike. It was more than an aircraft. It was a symbol of ingenuity, representing the belief that technology could provide a decisive advantage in modern warfare. However, the excitement that surrounded the Brewster Buffalo's debut masked a deeper truth. Early evaluations often took place under ideal conditions, in clear skies, and with pilots who were carefully monitoring performance. These controlled environments could not simulate the intensity of actual combat. The military leadership did not yet understand how small design compromises could grow into catastrophic vulnerabilities when subjected to the pressures of war. As America and its allies prepared to engage in large-scale aerial battles, the gap between innovative design and battlefield reality would soon be exposed in the most unforgiving way. As the early promise of the Brewster Buffalo began to meet the demands of real-world service, troubling signs emerged. Incremental modifications meant to improve survivability and combat effectiveness slowly undermined the aircraft's original advantages. Engineers added heavier guns, additional armor, and extra fuel tanks in an attempt to meet evolving tactical requirements. Each addition, while intended to make the plane more formidable, had a cumulative effect on performance. The aircraft became sluggish in handling, its climb rate diminished, and its maneuverability, once celebrated, suffered significantly. These changes transformed what was once a nimble and responsive fighter into a machine that struggled to match the speed and agility of its adversaries. Structural weaknesses also became apparent. The airframe, initially designed for moderate stress during training flights and controlled maneuvers, could not withstand the extreme forces encountered in prolonged dogfights. Wing spars and control surfaces sometimes flexed beyond safe limits, leading to mid-air failures that proved fatal for pilots. Maintenance crews reported accelerated wear on engines and landing gear, problems exacerbated by the added weight and extended operational requirements. Pilots noted that even routine turns or evasive maneuvers demanded more effort, reducing their ability to react to enemy attacks. The aircraft that had once inspired confidence in early flight tests now carried a growing reputation for vulnerability. Air warfare in the early 1940s was unforgiving. Allied forces understood that fighter aircraft needed to excel in speed, climb rate, and dogfighting capability to survive against well-equipped Axis fighters. The Buffalo's diminishing performance placed it at a stark disadvantage, particularly when facing Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters in the Pacific theater. Pilots who had once praised its stability now described it as cumbersome and underpowered. The addition of extra weight and firepower, though technically sound in theory, had made the aircraft slower to respond, less able to evade attacks, and more susceptible to enemy fire. The story of the Brewster Buffalo highlights a critical lesson in military aviation history. Innovation alone is insufficient if operational realities are not fully considered. Aircraft design is a delicate balance between speed, maneuverability, protection, and firepower. Even small miscalculations or well-intentioned improvements can transform a promising aircraft into a liability. As military leaders continued to deploy these planes to the front lines, pilots would soon confront the consequences of design decisions that looked impressive on paper but faltered under the pressures of real combat. The aircraft's shortcomings were becoming impossible to ignore, foreshadowing a grim reality that would test the courage and skill of every pilot who took to the skies in its cockpit. In late 1941, as World War II intensified across multiple theaters, the Brewster Buffalo finally faced its first true test in combat. Deployed to the Pacific Theater, a region where Japanese air power was advancing rapidly, the aircraft encountered conditions that would expose its most dangerous flaws. A group of American and Allied pilots, many with minimal combat experience, found themselves pitted against the highly maneuverable Mitsubishi A6M0, a fighter that had already established a reputation for unmatched agility and firepower. The pilots quickly realized that the Buffalo's theoretical advantages could not compensate for its declining performance in real aerial engagements. The first dogfights were brutal and unforgiving. Pilots reported that the Buffalo struggled to climb quickly enough to gain tactical positioning, a critical requirement when facing enemy fighters capable of diving, climbing, and turning with extraordinary speed. The added weight from armor and fuel tanks made evasive maneuvers cumbersome, leaving pilots vulnerable to attacks from multiple directions. Reports from the front lines detailed pilots witnessing their comrades being shot down before they could react, the aircraft's structural weaknesses failing to absorb even moderate hits. Each sortie became a harrowing test of skill and endurance, exposing the stark gap between design promise and battlefield reality. Human experiences during these early battles underscore the tragic cost of flawed aircraft design. Young pilots, eager to prove themselves, faced the cruel lesson that bravery alone could not overcome mechanical limitations. Many had trained on aircraft that handled predictably in simulations and exercises, only to discover that the added weight and sluggish controls made split-second decisions deadly. Casualty rates soared, with squadrons suffering losses that were difficult to replace in the midst of an ongoing war. Tactical doctrine, which emphasized teamwork, formation flying, and strategic positioning, often failed to protect pilots when the aircraft itself could not perform as expected under enemy fire. The Buffalo's first combat engagements also had broader strategic implications. Military commanders, previously confident in the plane's potential, were forced to reassess deployment strategies and consider whether it was feasible to rely on aircraft that could not compete effectively in the air. The Pacific Theater became a proving ground not just for pilots, but for the very assumptions behind aircraft design. The brutal reality of combat revealed that even advanced engineering, when compromised by incremental design flaws and rushed production, could result in catastrophic consequences. These lessons would resonate across Allied air forces, shaping future decisions about fighter development, pilot training, and tactical planning in the years to come. By mid-1942, the consequences of relying on flawed fighter aircraft like the Brewster Buffalo were impossible to ignore. Squadrons in the Pacific Theater had suffered devastating losses, and the human cost was staggering. Pilots who had survived the initial engagements were often left traumatized by the experiences of watching friends and comrades fall to enemy fire, powerless to respond effectively. The Buffalo, once celebrated as an advanced fighter, had become emblematic of the dangerous gap between innovation on paper and battlefield reality. Military planners were forced to confront the truth. Promising designs could quickly become deadly liabilities when engineering compromises failed under the harsh conditions of war. The historical legacy of the Brewster Buffalo extends beyond its immediate operational failures. The aircraft's shortcomings provided crucial lessons for future fighter development. Militaries began to recognize that incremental changes, such as adding weight or armor without recalculating the aircraft's overall performance envelope, could be disastrous. Designers and engineers were compelled to adopt a more rigorous approach to testing, incorporating realistic combat simulations and accounting for the stresses of prolonged engagements. The experiences of pilots flying the Buffalo also influenced tactical doctrine, emphasizing the need to align strategies with the true capabilities of the machines in service rather than relying on theoretical specifications. Internationally, the story of the Brewster Buffalo resonated with air forces around the world. Countries that had purchased the aircraft, such as Finland and the Netherlands, faced similar challenges, though some, like Finland, managed to adapt tactics to partially mitigate weaknesses. In contrast, American and British pilots had little room for adaptation, highlighting the importance of matching aircraft design to the operational environment. The lessons learned were clear: superior engineering alone was not sufficient. Aircraft had to combine durability, maneuverability, speed, and firepower in a balanced design that could withstand the pressures of modern aerial combat. Ultimately, the Brewster Buffalo serves as a cautionary tale in the history of military aviation. Its story illustrates how rapid innovation, when combined with inadequate testing and overambitious design modifications, can have fatal consequences. The losses endured by squadrons during World War II underscore the critical importance of aligning engineering, tactical planning, and operational reality. While the Buffalo represented early promise and technological aspiration, its legacy is defined by the hard-earned knowledge that even the most innovative aircraft must be tested rigorously before being entrusted to pilots facing the unforgiving realities of war. The lessons of the Buffalo continue to inform modern aircraft design, reminding historians, engineers, and military strategists alike that a brilliant concept is only as effective as its performance in the skies.